Hello and welcome to the English Hour. Today we have a special guest, one of my colleagues and friends, Talib from Boğaziçi is with me today, and we will talk about something that I think is related to pretty much anyone, and the topic is what matters at the end of the life. So the question is about the end of the life, but I think I will also talk about what matters in life in general. So not only at the end of the life, but what matters throughout your life. So let's get started with the main question. Talib, what do you think are the things that matter in life?
All right, I think this is a very difficult question, and I don't think there is a right answer to that one, and it changes from one person to another. So what is important for me may only be trivial for you.
I don't quite agree with that because, I think there are things that matter to everyone and there are things that matter to certain people. For example, here is my question. I think if I tell you that happiness is something that matters to anyone, would you agree?
Yeah, it is something that matters to everyone on this planet, but the way that people define happiness differs. My definition of happiness is probably different from yours. So what I do to be happy may not be, equal to the things that you do to be
That's
happy.
true.
So there are some differences.
Then let's talk about the general things that make people happy, and then we can talk about the definitions and how different people perceive those things differently. So, for example, happiness is one thing. Relationships, I think, is another. So people want relationships. And in fact, there's a longitudinal study. I think it's one of the studies by Harvard University. And it went on for several generations. And at the end of the study, they concluded that the single most important thing for people to feel happy through their lives and to feel satisfied is personal relationships, and it's very striking to me. So it mattered more than anything. It mattered more than health. It mattered more than I think money. It mattered more than status. People cherished and valued their personal relationships more than anything at the end of their lives. Is it interesting? Do you find that surprising, Talib? What do you think?
Yeah, it is a surprising finding, but you know that relationships are really important for people. Humans are social beings, so in order to be happy, we need to socialize and interact with others. We need to share our thoughts, emotions, and so on. That is part of, in fact, being human. It is surprising, but not so surprising at the same time.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that things that people normally value, such as being wealthy, having a lot of money. Most people would think that is important because, for example, it is expensive today to remain healthy. You need to eat organic food. Hospitals are really expensive. So, having a certain level of prosperity, I think, is a must.
It is.
Otherwise, it would be quite challenging for you to. You might feel happy from time to time, but having this continual state of happiness depends to some extent on your prosperity as well.
I agree.
But even then, even if you're a poor person, you can be happy through your relationships. There are a lot of things, small things that you can enjoy in life. If that weren't so, then most of the people would have to be unhappy because only a small minority in the world are really rich people, right?
Yeah, well, the minority, or you could say 1% of the population holds more than 40% of the world's wealth. And that's very striking. So one person gets 40 pieces, and then 99% or 99 people get 40 pieces. There is a disproportionate inequality, and it's quite striking. And the gap between the social classes is continuing to increase, and there are, for example, in the US, there are discussions about the middle class and how middle class is disappearing. For example, there is a wealth gap between the lower classes and the upper classes, and that gap is continuing to increase, and there seems to be no way that gap would be bridged sometime soon. And your remarks about wealth and personal finance are sound, and I think there are several TED Talks. There was one interesting TED Talk about the relationship between money and happiness, and there is definitely truth to the saying that you need money. So a certain amount of money is definitely necessary to lead a happy life. As you said, you have health expenses, you have food expenses if you want to consume quality food. So those all require financial resources. And for example, if you want to go on a trip with your loved ones, if you want to buy gifts for them, like material gifts, then you will definitely need money. So a certain amount of financial resource is definitely a must. But the study shows that after you have enough money for your personal or family expenses, after a certain threshold, so for example, maybe after $1 million or after $2 million, I'm not sure. So I'm talking about the American context, not the Turkish one. So the figures would be much lower in a Turkish context. So after a certain threshold, the more money you have, you won't have more happiness. So there is this law of diminishing returns. So to a certain point, you will get returns, meaning you will have more happiness. But after a certain threshold, the amount of money that you earn or gain will not impact your happiness tremendously. So after that point, so the study concludes with an interesting finding. So after that point, what makes people happy is charity, like doing charitable activities. For example, I guess it's one of the factors why a lot of billionaires have philanthropic organizations. For example, Bill Gates, he has billions of dollars. He's one of the most richest. He is one of the richest people in the world, and he has done remarkable work in Africa. He has done a lot to fight with polio and other diseases in the African continent. He is doing a lot of work with regards to sanitation. So he's taking a lot of responsibility for humanitarian missions, and I think he derives great pleasure from this endeavor. They have Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it's doing great work. And I know a lot of people, a lot of billionaires who have such foundations doing charitable work around the world. And I think after reaching a certain, for example, financial maturity, then doing charitable work and helping others who are less fortunate becomes more meaningful. But of course, if you're trying to get by, if you're trying to pay the bills, then it's of course difficult to think about helping others. So
that is right, but there is also another theory of happiness. They say that it's also related to personality. So every person has a fixed level of happiness. This may change after dramatic events. For example, if you earn a lot of money suddenly, for example, if you win the lottery, then you'll be tremendously happy, but this will only last for a short period of time. After a certain time period, then you will return to your normal levels of happiness.
It's transient, temporary.
And it is a theory, and I think there are numerous research studies that advocate this finding.
Well, it's interesting. For example, a couple weeks ago, the Americans have lottery. I'm not sure if it's jackpot or something else. So they have a lottery system, and one person was due to get more than $1 million, or even more. I don't quite remember the number. It was a huge figure. So And there were a lot of news about how that money would sort of cripple that person, because there are studies showing that people who won the lottery sort of use up all their money in a matter of years. Like in a couple of years, they go back to their initial state. And maybe their personal relationships suffer, maybe their health suffers, because, having money is one thing, managing or knowing how to manage is another. So you might, for example, as a person, you might inherit millions of dollars, but if you don't know how to manage your money, then you will end up losing all that money, because, it's just like anything else in life. If you mismanage your resources, then you will lose them. What do you think?
Yeah, but obviously that man who won the lottery and then lost all of his money was not a really wise person. This is something different from happiness and having a mixed level of happiness.
Yeah.
Probably that person was searching happiness all the time. Therefore, he spent all of his money.
That's
on
true.
buying things. I don't know. Maybe not. But
there is a saying that goes like this: happiness comes from within. So if you search for happiness outside, if you search for happiness in material things, for example, okay, I'll buy this new house and I'll be very happy. I'll buy this new car and I'll be happy. If your happiness is not intrinsic, if it does not come from your heart, and if it's bound to something material, then once you gain it, then that shiny object becomes normal. For example, you buy a new house, you feel great, wow, I've got my dream house, you're happy maybe for a couple of weeks, and then once you become accustomed to it, it doesn't make you as happy.
Yeah, it's very important. Getting used to things. This is, I think, a very precious thing for humans. Being able to adapt to any situation. But it's at the same time, a curse. Because even when you have, a great house, for example, as you said, then you get used to it, and it becomes a normal part of life, and then you don't cherish it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. So, we talked about wealth, we talked about personal relationships. Is there anything that can matter for people in terms of happiness?
Yeah, I was going to ask another question. In fact, since we are educators, I want to believe that anything can be learned. So do you think one can learn to be happy?
I think one can learn to be happy, and it's a mindset. And this is something I like very much. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow in psychology talks about primitive needs and higher order or higher level needs. For example, if you're hungry, you don't really think about having personal relationships because your stomach is hurting you, so you want something to eat. If you're thirsty, you don't care about the ideals or freedom or anything. You just want water. So there are levels of human needs. So you start with the most primitive ones, and then you go up the ladder. So, and at the top of the list, the triangle, you might call it a triangle, there is self-realization. And then when you achieve that level, you are basically transcending everything, and you're a happy and whole human being. So there are levels of happiness, and I think those can be taught. For example, if you know this model, you can build your happiness. You can say, well, first I need to take care of my basic needs. For example, I need to make sure that I know how to pay my bills. I know how to feed myself. So you first take care of those. Yeah, check mark. And then you move up to the other level, to the upper level. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe education, having a family, like having a house. Aesthetics and so on. So you move up the ladder, and then at the top, so at the bottom you have more physical things, but at the top, the more you go up, the more abstract things become. For example, self-realization is an abstract concept. It's not concrete. You cannot hold self-realization in your hand, so it's not possible. So self-realization is a concept. It's like fulfilling your potential. So I think people can learn to be happy, and there's a model for this. And I think feelings are also about our mindset. So you can learn to be happy, you can learn to be more tolerant, but it takes a lot of practice. One doesn't become very patient the other day. So I tell you the principles of being very patient, and the next day I cannot expect you to be very, very patient. That's not realistic.
Yeah, just like with anything else. I mean, learning takes time, whatever it is that you're learning. So that is right. But at the same time, it seems to be as if this ladder, I mean, as you go up the ladder, it becomes more personal.
It does.
For example, eating or those physical needs are relevant for everybody in the world. However, self-realization is defined probably differently by each person. For example, the way I realize myself would be different than yours, because we have different interests, right?
Yeah.
Then it really complicates the definition of happiness and self-realization at the same time, because we cannot say that, I mean, if you do this happy, you'll become happier, right?
But there's a path. I mean, for example, when you take the road of happiness, our path might not be the same, but the roadblocks or the main trajectory will be very similar, or at least that's what I think. For example, we talked about wealth, we talked about personal relationships, we talked about basic needs as a means of happiness, and I think there is another thing. For example, this might really relate to that personal aspect. For example, I think for me a part of happiness is producing something useful and learning. So when I learn something new, for example, when I learn a new skill, when I learn a new concept, I feel happier because it makes me a better human being. And additionally, when I do something, for example, when I produce something useful, for example, this podcast is something useful. So when I record this podcast, I feel happy because I feel that I'm helping a lot of people, both here in Turkey and around the world, to both learn about interesting topics and to practice and to improve their English and listening skills. So this makes me happy. So learning and producing helpful, useful materials is a means of happiness for me.
Yeah, I mean, for example, for other people, I mean, learning something new and I mean, spending a lot of time on, for example, reading like you do. I mean, that would be a boring activity for many people, right?
Yeah, I mean, for some people, the idea of happiness is lying around, maybe in a cottage on a beach.
Traveling or singing. I mean,
I love traveling.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't like it. I love it. It's very interesting. I think it's also very instructive. So when I travel, I learn a lot of new things, and it's a form of learning for me.
Yeah, I mean, these all show then that, I mean, people feel happy for different things, right?
Okay.
It's very personal.
Then I've got this question for you. So what are the things that make you happy, Talib? Tell me about it.
I think, I mean,
Cheesecake,
those things are
coffee.
really, I mean, similar to yours. I mean,
Okay.
I like reading, and therefore I read a lot.
Yeah.
I also like watching films, for example, so I'm really interested in cinema. At the same time, I feel very happy when I help people. That is why I think I've become a teacher.
Yeah.
Because when I teach students and when I observe their development, it makes me really, really happy. I mean, the feeling that I'm helping somebody become a better person. Yeah.
Or reach their goals.
Yeah.
Like the happiness they have.
It is really fulfilling.
Yeah, it is. I think that's one of the best parts of being a teacher. For example, when a friend, sometimes a friend or sometimes a student, when a student of mine calls me and says, okay, I passed my exam, thank you, my family and we're very happy and we appreciate what you've done so far. It's a great feeling because you basically transform someone's life, and especially if that someone is someone who failed several times. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, I mean, there are normal cases and there are extreme cases. Sometimes you work with a student who failed several times, and the family, the parents, and the student, they're in a low mood. They're kind of depressed. And if you can help them out, that's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah, and it's a great achievement at the same time.
It
Not
is.
only for that student, but also for you as well.
Sure.
I mean, as you said, I think that that is the reason many people choose to become a teacher. I think it's not for the money, because you can't earn a lot really. It is because of sharing those beautiful moments. Not only success, not only achievements, but also sometimes failures as well. You share the feelings of these people. You try to comfort them when they are sad. So this is also a part of teaching, I think. I failed many times in my life, but I have learned from them, right?
Yeah.
So even making someone realize that failure is not the end of the world. It is a great.
It's the beginning of a new failure.
Yeah. But
don't be sad. You'll make another mistake. So that's okay.
There is a good saying. A failure is not the same as an ultimate defeat.
That's true.
Yeah.
You might.
We need to
there's another saying. I don't quite remember. You might lose the battle, but you might win the war.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So it happens.
That's a great one as well.
Like one small defeat does not mean you are fully defeated.
Yeah, you need to search for that ultimate defeat.
Ultimate defeat. Well, I'd rather say the ultimate victory or lead. Well, yeah. So we talked about teaching and learning as a means of staying happy. Well,
we can ask our followers what makes them happy.
Yeah, sure.
They can write their comments and at the same time practice their English.
Sure. So everyone, if you're listening to this episode, make sure that you share what makes you happy in the comments. So, for example, if you're listening to this on YouTube or watching this on YouTube, share in the comments your sources of happiness. What makes you happy? It might be your little daughter. For example, I've got a little baby daughter, and she makes me very happy. And I guess right around 1.5 years old, it's I guess the best times of her childhood, or like infant times. I'm not so sure what to call that. So my baby girl, she makes me happy. Teaching and learning, it makes me happy. Producing something useful makes me happy. Being able to take care of my needs makes me happy. Mm-hmm. Spending time with my family and friends makes me happy. So these are, I guess, things that make me happy. So share in the comments what makes you happy.
Now, before this, I want to ask you another question.
Yeah.
What do you think is your greatest achievement in life?
I guess my greatest achievement in life is yet to come.
Okay.
It's a work in progress.
Okay, how about so far?
I'm not sure. Like, I don't think I really measure things in that respect. So it's like I like doing things that matter, but I don't really measure their impact. For example, I can talk about several things. But so far, I think what I am most proud of is being able to help millions of students. Mm-hmm. For example, as recently, I have been checking the stats on my website and YouTube channels, and it seems that if I combine the total views across my web properties like the YouTube channel, the websites, and other sources, more than, I think, 8 million views have been amassed so far. So it equals to about 4 million people, because generally one person views 2 or 3 pages. So far, I think I've helped 4 million people, and in total, I've received more than 8 million views, page views or video views, and that makes me extremely happy.
Mm-hmm. So you're reaching more and more people, and that's why you said that you haven't yet achieved your,
Yeah, my biggest achievement is yet to come. Well, that's one of the things, but for example, this year I'm planning, or I'm hoping to help or reach 50 million people.
Wow.
So, but this isn't just going to be domestic. So I'll help people in Turkey, but I'm also hoping to help people abroad. So I will be producing more material in English, and I'll be publishing it on international platforms. Mm-hmm. as a result, I'm hoping to help students here in Turkey, and I'm hoping to help students in different countries, maybe in Europe, in the Gulf, in South Asia,
anywhere. Basically.
Anywhere. So basically, basically anywhere on Earth. So this year,
and soon on Mars.
I'm not sure. I mean, if there's life, or if we decide to build something on Mars, yeah, why not? But so far, my goals are limited to the Earth, and I have to limit them, due to certain reasons you might relate to. Yeah, practical reasons.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, what is the one thing that makes you most proud and happy, Talib? Let me return the question.
Yeah. I think it is being a person who people trust.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It is really difficult to. I'm trying to be a modest person here, but at the same time, I'm really happy that people say that they like me, that I'm a good person.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, every time I hear that, it feels gorgeous. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Well, what are the plans for this year, for the future? Like, for example, what is your next accomplishment?
I think I need to start working on my PhD dissertation.
That makes me smile.
Yeah.
I also have to work on my term papers, but I'm not sure if I'll be ever able to get to it.
Yeah.
I might need a little help.
I don't either. But we need to do that, right?
Guys, the higher you go, the academic ladder, the harder things get. So, for example,
it holds for anything in life.
Yeah. For example, so the assignments, the projects that you complete in your BA, in your undergrad, is nothing compared to what you're expected to do in your master's or in your PhD. So things got a lot tougher, the readings, the expectations, the detail. So things get, as I said, a lot tougher. And then you need a lot of extra grit, a lot of motivation, determination, because when things get tough and there are not many people sharing your emotions, I guess your fellow classmates will have similar feelings to some degree, but things get tough and you need some help.
Yeah, I used to read, for example, I think 100 pages every week when I was an undergraduate. Now that I'm doing my PhD, I have to read a book every week, 500 pages and so on, and that will not be enough.
And the thing is, this isn't like reading a novel or detective story. It's very heavy. It's very heavy academic material, and you have to really go through dense pages to make sense out of it. And it's a different experience.
Yeah, and you need to look at every sentence you read from a critical perspective.
I think we should stop complaining about our PhD,
or
our advisors might get a little unhappy.
But we love that, right?
Yeah,
that's why we are doing.
Yeah, currently I don't know if I have an advisor. I probably have one, but it's not in a dissertation capacity. But I guess I like my advisor, and I will love my advisor.
We're allowed to lie here, right?
Honestly, I like the people I work with. So, for example, I think I feel honored and privileged and basically happy to be working with the people I'm working with, like my friends, my colleagues, my peers, my classmates at the PhD classes, and my advisors and instructors. They're all very, very nice people. But other than being nice, there are people who know what they're talking about. They are basically people dedicated to their field, dedicated to research and development. So I really like that part.
Yeah, they are. I think experts in their fields, and they're really very important people in their fields, not only in Turkey but also in the world.
Yeah.
So we must feel, privileged.
I do feel that way.
Yeah,
well, guys, I think it's time to wrap things up. Well, if we go back to the main discussion, the main question of today's episode, that was what matters at the end of the life. So we learned that personal relationships matter more than anything else, and it's backed by research. But also being able to pay for your needs and maybe pursuing hobbies that you can sustain over a long term might be alternative means of happiness. So the idea of happiness and the idea of what matters might differ. Of course, there are individual differences, but there are also a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of overlap between those definitions.
Yeah, I think you need to believe in and maybe invest in what we sometimes call something bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. So if you believe in something higher, something bigger, if you have a higher purpose in life, I think that keeps you energized. For example, okay, if I can find my phone, just wait a second. I'll have a look at my phone. I'll show you something.
We will never finish this.
Okay, I'll show you something.
This will go on and on and on.
I just need to clean my screen because there is something here that I'd like you to see. But before I can show it to you, I have to clean the screen. So let's see if you can see it.
No.
Okay, here on the screen, it reads 50 million people. As I said, this year I'm planning to help 50 million people, and I have it on my phone, on the screen.
As a reminder.
Yeah, as a reminder. So, it reads 50 million people. So, whenever I log on to my phone, whenever I look at my phone, I see that. It's a constant reminder. Well, there are times I'm doing nothing about it, but there are times that I feel, okay, I've got to do something. I've got to record a new episode. I've got to write a new blog post. I've got to prepare a new book. Or, I have to do things that help people.
Mm-hmm.
So, having a higher purpose.
Yeah, you need to take
helps.
some time off as well.
Yeah, well, that's true, because sometimes I feel very close to burnout.
And overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, I feel overwhelmed and I feel very close to burnout. For example, I think it's important for people to know about this. For example, this is a personal story. So this morning we were having breakfast with Talib, and I was telling him about this. For example, yesterday I felt very down. There wasn't a single bit of energy in my body. I felt like sleeping the whole day. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go to classes. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to sleep. I didn't care about anything, because and it's it was close to depression and burnout, because it happens when you force yourself too much, when you don't take a break. So it's natural, but as I said, you have to take care of yourself so that you can avoid such situations. So I felt very down, kind of anxious, not totally depressed, but I didn't feel great. It wasn't my regular mood. But today I'm fine. I took some break. So yesterday I took some pills and I just got some sleep and some rest. I didn't care about anything. I didn't talk to anyone.
It has nothing to do with those pills and sleeping. It's because of me that you're feeling better today.
Might be. I'm not sure. Or it might be because of my little baby girl.
Yeah.
She gave me a big smile in the morning.
Yeah, that's a better reason.
She made me happy. And Talib is trying to take credit for this. And he can partly get credit for this, but I guess he's part of the solution, not the solution itself.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. That's it. And as I said, please make sure that you share your comments with us. And if you're listening to this on a podcast app, please make sure that you rate this podcast and you share your comments with everyone so that others can find it as well. And we really appreciate your help, and we'll see you in the next episode.